In this video, I want to give a short comment on the planned extension of the White House that was just announced recently by Donald Trump. So specifically, the East Wing should be extended by a ballroom. So in this video, I want to comment on what I think of the overall design and also how classical architecture was applied, if it's done correctly or not, and criticize the design, what could be made better in my opinion. Because as you know, I'm an architect, but I focus on classical architecture on this channel. So I want to take a critical look on this planned classical architecture project. So first, let's start with the broader scale. When we look at the exterior, it's very obvious that this building has quite a, let's say, remarkable design. And this is also the main criticism, because the White House, if I would find like one word for it, it's like humble. You could also say even boring. So it follows a classicistic architecture from around 1800. But specifically when we look on this old first facade design from the architect James Oban, an Irish architect who designed the White House around 1800, then we can see that it follows quite a clear version of classical architecture, which was like common around 1800. So a classicism that reminds me a bit of like Northern German C.F. Hansen architecture. So a very reduced and humble form. And even the current White House, if we look at the front facade facing the street, you could say there's not too much special about it. So there are these 4 Ionic columns, and then it's, you could say humble or maybe even pretty boring. And if we look on the back facade, the only, let's say, remarkable thing is this oval or this half circle that stands out, also with Ionic columns, and the double terrace. And then remarkably, the garden facade has like pilasters, and that we can also see in the floor plan, while the more representative entrance facade do not have pilasters. So we see that when we look on the floor plan from the time and details, the pilaster we can see here on the garden facade and remarkably also on the side facade, but on the front it's left pure. I don't know why. So the more representative street facade is even more pure, and the garden facade has at least the structuring with the risalites, and that we can see here behind the trees. And they also have the Ionic columns. So it's a little bit, let's say, decoration, but it's still very reduced form. And when we look on the whole ensemble, how it was now, then the side buildings, the east and the west wing, even like try to integrate themselves even more humble than the main building. So they follow their own architectural language, also in this classicistic style. But when we look at the current east wing, the building itself, it's actually pretty boring. It has this a bit more representative porch on the front with these double columns. But the rest, when you look on the second floor of the main facade, it doesn't even have a pediment. It's just this horizontal line and these, let's say, factory-like windows. And when we look at the current west wing, so the power center of the White House, also there, the facade is pretty reduced. So the whole ensemble followed this very strict form of classicism from around 1800. And then this new building technically is also classicistic. So it has more Baroque appearance. But if we look on the details, it follows classicistic rules. But because mainly it has this very strong axisymmetry and these cornerstones at the side, and then this large stair on the front, so that makes it gives it a very strong appearance. So I think now this kind of ballroom stands out more architectonically and makes itself more important than the main residence of the White House, and that's actually the problem. And also much more important than the West Wing, which is the factual power center, it's called, right? Because the offices, the Oval Office is there, and also the other offices of administratively important people in the US are located in the West Wing, while the White House itself is the living residence of the president. But still, this ballroom, which is obviously just for the parties, let's say, like a party room, is now the most important element in the whole architecture, and that's a bit an error, I would say. And also it disbalanced the whole ensemble when we look here in the bird's view. Now the White House is still the most important part, and the West Wing is the second biggest, and the East Wing is the smallest. But if we extend it, it looks like it would be extended something like this here, right? Then the East Wing becomes the most important part, and obviously more important than the West Wing. and architectonically also the most important element. So it's a bit like egocentric and self-centered design, I would say, from the outside. Maybe it fits a bit the current precedent, but yeah, still I think it's a problem regarding the whole ensemble. And then also it becomes quite funny when we look at the details, because when we zoom in here on another picture, we can question the functionality of this large stair, which is obviously the most remarkable part in the design. So when we look at that, I think that come to the attention are obviously these windows in these arc shapes and the large stairs. And then we can see, first of all, the White House doesn't have any arc windows, at least not in the main building. And when we look at the stairs detailed in another image, first I thought they're connecting the terrace with the garden. So I thought when the people party here in the ballroom, they can go out with a glass of champagne on this balcony and then go down in the garden. But when we zoom in here, we can see here there's even no connection at this point between the terrace and the stairs. So you can't even go down from the stairs into the garden. And then you think, okay, then it's about the main windows. But if we see these three main arcs here, they don't have a connection to the stairs either because of how the stairs are shaped. But then you would think, okay, then it's these two doors here, they might have an exit. But actually it become even worse. When we look at the other image, then you can even see that none of the windows have a door that will be an exit to that stairs. So you could say, okay, maybe this is just like a concept sketch, but it's not a concept sketch because the whole model is extremely precise. As we see later, all the details are modeled already. So I can't imagine that they want to build a door here and they insert a window. So it really looks like these three opening here are windows. And you can see here's a balustrade going around, and there's not even one exit to the big stairs. So that means the most important and remarkable element of this whole building, besides the arcs and this colonnade in the first floor, these big stairs don't make any sense because they lead up to somewhere, and first they're not connected to the terrace, and second, you can't even go into the building. So they're just pure decoration. So this becomes like really absurd in my opinion, because they're such a remarkable and important element in the design from outside. And then, by the way, they're also a bit too wide for this kind of type of stair. They could be a bit more narrow. So they don't even, it seems like they don't even have any function. And even if they had, then it's also the problem because they indicate this strong symmetry by emphasizing the symmetrical axis. But then even when they lead to the balcony on the left, then the question is, why do we need the stairs on the right? So that they wouldn't lead to anywhere because there's no terrace on the right side. There's only one on the left side. But now we see that they don't have access. They don't access anything anyway. There's no door that you can access this stair. So it's really an absurd element of planning. So, but let's talk about the architectural language. So when we look in the interior, what's very obvious first is the color scheme of the white and the gold. So that's a bit a taste thing. So I would say about the whole thing, this architecture office is a famous, let's say, well-settled architectural office in terms of classical architecture, and they know what they're doing. So when we look at the details, you could say, okay, the proportions of the building are well done. They know how to employ classical architecture. All the proportions of all columns are correct. And so in the outside and also in the inside, so they kind of know what they're doing. So I can't criticize anything that the columns are wrong or that the building itself is bad. I just, if you cut it off and build it somewhere else, I would say it's good, but just not in the context of this humble White House. And again, the least important part, which is the party central, let's say the ballroom, becomes now the most important element. And the most important element, which is the West Wing, becomes the least important one, and of course the most famous one, the building residence in the center, the White House itself, becomes like not important at all in the architectural language. So this is not good in an architectonical point of balancing the importances. And we see this, by the way, also in the columns that are employed. So for those who are deeper interested in architecture, so the White House itself uses the Ionic column all around. So that means in the front and in the back, which is like in the hierarchy of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, the middle one. So I don't know why the architect chose that, but it's also a form of humbleness that he didn't choose the highest column, which would be the Corinthian. for the columns of the White House. So the Ionic columns are chosen, and then the two wings on the side, the east and the west wing, actually both does it correctly. They employ even the Tuscan order, which is even lower than the Doric one. So if we look on the proportion, for example, of the entrance columns of the west wing, so the most important part technically of the building, it's very humble there that the proportions could be Roman Doric proportion, but actually when we look at the entablature, it's clear Tuscan one. So I would read this also as a gesture of humbleness, that the west and the east wing by the architect was designed even with a gap in between, let's say, the Ionic and the Tuscan order. So that means they didn't employ the Doric order for some reason. So probably because of humbleness, they wanted to leave a gap between Ionic and the order that they used, the Tuscan one. So now the new design, as I said, this architecture office knows what they're doing, because how they designed the classical architecture is done correctly, but they use the Corinthian order, which is the highest one. Okay, there's also a composite order, but I kind of want to discard that. But so in general, so the Corinthian order is the highest order, and now they employ this one to actually design all the columns outside and all the columns inside only with Corinthian capitals, which is the highest order. And also in this way, how they use the columns, it literally trumps the White House, which is the Ionic order. So as I said, the east and the west wing, which were added later to the White House, even create a gap between the Ionic columns from the White House and the Tuscan order, which is used there to show more humbleness and respect to the White House. And now the ballroom gets also the most important order and the only place where this kind of Corinthian order appears at the facade. So again, also in terms of architectural language that probably not everyone on the first sight understands, the ballroom makes it much more important than the White House, both the residence and the administrative building of the West Wing. Okay, but when we look in the interior, so the color scheme, in my opinion, is not really my taste, because I think this gold in different points emphasizes always the small details, and it looks more nervous on the overall. So it's just two colors, white or like an off-white, and then the gold. But in my opinion, I would prefer if it's more like a color scheme which is more fluent and not so pointing out certain small details. And then even when we look at the columns, so as I said, the Corinthian columns, that I use only Corinthian columns here, are proportioned correctly. So a Corinthian column should have, if this is the lower diameter, a height of 10 roughly, and they do. But then what I don't like is kind of how they stack all the columns together here in the corner. So you see here, there you have like 3 columns on a bunch. I would suggest to have a like decorated pillar, like let's say with a squared floor plan in the corner here, as this one, as the main part which holds the ceiling, which becomes higher and at this point. So I would suggest a pillar with a squared section here at this point. But they put like 3 columns here on the bunch already, which makes sense, I guess, in the floor plan. But then there's another 4th one because of this inlay where the door is. So you have 4 Corinthian columns on a bunch here in different geometrical positions, let's say, speaking of the floor plan. And it looks like very overload everything. And then what's really funny are these windows, because, I mean, as I said, the White House doesn't have any arc windows as a main architectural element. The West Wing have some, but the White House itself doesn't have any. So, but I don't understand how they want to open that, because normally there should be an access here in the center with opening parts, and then you open to the left and the right, and then these beams here wouldn't look so thick either. They look like unnaturally thick, maybe because of the safety, but I don't know how they want to open that. If so, as I said, the building is so detailed, so you can't tell me it's just a concept sketch and will be worked out later. I mean, look at the ornament, it's all completely finished, the design, and as I said, the ornamentation is done correctly in terms of classical architecture, so the office knows what they're doing. But then these windows look to me like they cannot just be opened at all. So if you can't open them, why doing the terrace then? So as I criticized before, you can't go down to the garden with the stairs because the stairs don't connect the terrace. But why do you need a large terrace if you can't open the windows? So just in a comparison here on this picture, I think this is probably the West Wing. Anyway, you see the very thick center here, and then you can see you can open this door. So this guy here having a phone call, whoever that is, and then the windows in the ballroom you can't open at all in this rendering. So I don't understand that. And yeah, it looks to me a bit like, because of the color scheme, it looks everything a bit overload and very representative. So the whole building, I think, wants to be more than it actually is. And the main criticism, it wants to be more than it should be. So it's just like very egocentric and self-centered. Although if you build this thing in a modified, let's say, a modified exterior version somewhere else on the green land, it would be a nice classical building.